It's about to start, we'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hi, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is something super exciting. We are going to be smoothing out the video transitions in the Automixer for video. So in case you're new here, we have been working on a series of audio effects and I guess video processors as well. We are using the JSFX language that comes with REAPER. And in particular, right now, we are working on this effect called an Automixer. What an Automixer does is it takes the audio from several microphones that may be open in a room and changes the gain of these microphones depending on who is speaking. So the signal is going to come in louder into the microphone of the person who is speaking, but that same signal, the person speaking, will also be picked up by every other microphone in the room because of room reflections. And the Automixer is going to allocate more gain to this one microphone of the person who is speaking and lower the gain on all the other microphones. And this has the effect of reducing the bleed, the crosstalk between microphones that are open in the same room. So you can think of something like a podcast, a roundtable, an interview. These are the kinds of applications that I have in mind when developing an Automixer. And naturally, I did not come up with the concept of an Automixer, but we are implementing our own version in JSFX. And one thing that makes our version unique is that it is not only suitable for audio, that's the main purpose, it is to mix audio, but it is also useful for video. So if you have not only multiple microphones, but multiple cameras in the room, you can switch to the camera angle of the person who is speaking automatically. And there are two ways to do this. You can either do it in post production when you're editing that kind of interview. And for that, we have the Automixer for video in a video processor in REAPER. So of course, this only works if you are editing the podcast in REAPER. And then there is the second version that is for live broadcasts, live streams, just like this one. So REAPER is capable of controlling OBS remotely and switch scenes in OBS based on who is speaking, as long as you're doing the mixing of the audio in REAPER. And this whole structure of auto-mixing for video comes in three parts. First, we have to detect who is the person that's speaking. And we have already written the code for that part. We just look at the microphone that is the loudest. Then there is the third part that is to actually control the video processor or control OBS. And we have sketches in place for both of these. But there is part 2 that sits in the middle of parts 1 and 3. And that is to smooth out this data, because as it stands, it looks like this. Oh, before we jump into the demonstration, Mage is saying, "Hi, Leandro, I am sobering up, drank too much rum earlier with friends." Well, happy birthday. And hello to Tail. I'm looking forward to talking to Tail on Wednesday. And if you're watching this, you should probably tune in on Wednesday. We will be talking about the Clap new standard for plugins with Tail, who has implemented support for Clap in iPlug. And of course, that's on his own version of iPlug. Anyway, I hope that this makes for an entertaining stream today, and that you can recover from drinking too much. All right, so this is what the Automixer for video looks like right now. When I am speaking, it is red, and when I am not speaking, then there is this other person in the room that is just a tone generator, and that's represented by green. See, when I stopped speaking, it turned green. Perfect. But what you may also notice is that this is sometimes flickering. Maybe I'm just catching up my breath or whatever, and the Automixer thinks, oh, that person stopped speaking, I'll switch to another camera, and then switch back when they start speaking. So the camera switches are too fast, too jittery. And that's what we're going to work on today. We are going to be smoothing out these scene transitions. And when I say smoothing out, I don't mean that we will do some kind of dissolve effect between the camera angles. That is something that if you're interested in, you can do in OBS by changing the scene transition settings. And you can also do in video processors using all sorts of facilities. There are video processors that do that kind of dissolving already. What we are interested in, and when I say smoothing, I mean don't switch scenes so often. So we are going to try and stop this light show behind me today. And there are many ways of doing this, and we will probably end up exploring some fancy smoothing algorithms, or maybe not. Maybe the simple thing will do. The simple thing is to have two controls. I call them attack and hold, just because those are the names you find in things like compressors and gates and that sort of thing. Attack is going to be when the person starts speaking, don't necessarily switch to them right away. That's because maybe someone is in the middle of a long sentence, and as they're catching up their breath, the other person says, uh-huh, or says, okay, or says, yeah. But you don't want to necessarily switch to them right away. It is kind of janky when those kinds of edits happen. So it's a telltale sign that it is a computer doing the editing, not a human, because I think that in most cases a human would not switch to their camera unless they are doing or they are doing yeah, and they have something really interesting going on. Maybe they're doing a facial expression, or maybe they're showing something like that. But a human would not switch to that person naturally when editing. So that's what the attack is. We are going to wait a little bit. And this is something that, of course, will be a slider, but we will wait just a little bit after the person starts speaking to switch them, which is also something that even as one person stops speaking and the next one starts their sentence, is something that often comes up when editing video. You don't switch to the person right away. You wait a little bit, just the tiniest bit. And this is something that if you don't know about it, you probably didn't notice, but once you know about it, you will notice that editors do this everywhere. And not only on roundtables or interviews, in any kind of editing. So if you have an establishing shot of the building, and then you're going to cut to inside the building, two people speaking, you notice that usually the person starts speaking while the establishing shot is still going on, and then the shot switches. So usually you have these kinds of so-called J cuts or L cuts. That's just the way things usually are edited. So having this attack setting will sort of simulate that, where you will have someone start speaking and then wait a little bit and then switch to them. And that's something that is, I guess, to sort of mimic how a human would actually watch a conversation. If there are two people in front of you, you will probably be looking at the person who is speaking. And when the other person starts speaking, you will probably have to, for a split second, you will go like this, which takes a little bit of time. And that's what this kind of J cut, L cut is trying to simulate, I think. So that's the attack, the first setting that we will try to introduce today. The second one is hold. And that is just, if you switch to a camera, you are not allowed to switch to another one during this grace period, during this hold period. And the point of this is just to make the scene transitions not occur so fast in succession, which is something that perhaps would be usable for something like a fast-paced action movie or a fast-paced music video, but it's not the kind of editing you would like on an interview setting. So in that case, you would probably want to hold just a little bit, and we'll have to play around with some footage to find out what are the good parameters for this, but just wait a little bit after switching. Don't switch so fast. And let's see what you all have to say before I start coding these ideas that I have just explained. Hello, Silwitz, and hello, Bo. It's great to have you here. And Juan is here. Hello, Juan. Yeah, it is kind of psychedelic for now, but it won't be after today, hopefully. Yeah, okay, yeah, you are familiar with these kinds of names that I'm throwing around. Great. So let's try to make our program do J-cuts and L-cuts, as well as not induce people into seizures. We will have two sliders for this, and because they have to do with video, they will be the so-called group sliders, which is terrible news, because it means that we'll have to write a bunch of code for two measly sliders, but let's power through it. I guess I am going to leave a gap between the... So these are the group settings that have to do with audio. And then there will be the ones for video. So I think I'm going to leave a gap between these two. So let's leave slider 5 as a gap. And then we'll have slider 7 that will be video attack. And I want these to be group settings, not instance settings, because I don't think it makes sense to have different attacks or different holds for different people. Perhaps it could make sense, but I think it would be too complicated to explain to users, and it would be too complicated to set up. So just to take a step back here, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, in the Automixer, we have this notion of a group, and that is just all the microphones that are auto-mixed together. And this is useful because you may want to have a group of microphones mixed together, maybe 5 people in a room, and then they are on a Skype call with 3 other people in another room. So you would like to mix these two groups separately. But there are settings that had to be shared among all people in the group, all the microphones in that room. And those are the so-called group settings, and they are synced. So you have this Automixer, one instance per microphone, and when you switch, when you change, for instance, the strength, it will be synced across all the instances of that group, which is a kind of a complicated setup that we have going on here. But anyway, we want these video settings to be group settings. So the attack, let's say that this is going to be in milliseconds, and let's say that 100 milliseconds is the time it takes for you to like look from person 1 to person 2. So I think that that can be a good default. And let's say that it goes from 50, which is fast-paced, I think, to 200 milliseconds in steps of, let's say, 10 milliseconds. And we'll call this the camera switch attack in milliseconds. And because I have this in milliseconds, I will probably need this in samples as well. Or maybe not. But I guess I will. So I'll leave this extension for now, and I will call this the camera switch. And I'm calling these cameras And I guess it makes sense. In OBS, it would be called scenes. And in the video processor in Reaper, I guess it would just be called sources or tracks. But I think that the camera communicates better the intent of this slider or this concept in general. We'll see. And we'll also have hold. And I think that the hold needs to be slightly bigger. So let's say 500 milliseconds. Let's say that the minimum is 200. Let's say that the maximum is 10 seconds. 1 second. Not 10, 1 second. Naturally, all of this is given in terms of milliseconds. This is going to be slider age. And then we do want to leave a gap because this is, it's actually an audio setting, but it is not a group setting. It is an instance setting. So let's leave slider 9 and jump to 10. And this is an instance setting for video. So again, let's leave 11 and jump to 12. Next, I don't want these two sliders to show when video is turned off. And video is turned off by default because we have to compute a bunch of things if you're doing auto mixing for video, and we would like to avoid that CPU cost if you're not doing video at all. So by default, video is off, and by default, these two sliders should not be showing. So that's what we are going to do next. We are going to hide these sliders. But first, I will show that they are actually showing up. Because I know they're showing up, but you know. So video is off, and still these two settings are available for me to play around. And I don't think it's good form to show sliders that are not really doing anything. So we will come to the slider section, which is this section, and we will show and hide these sliders appropriately. Fun story. Look at what I did. Oh boy. My text editing skills are not here today. There you go. And I think that the order of these lines should match the order of the sliders. So we have a setting here for video track current, and that's the last one. So I think it should be more like this. And now the sliders should hide to begin with. And they do. But when I turn video on, they show up. Great. And I think on the description of the slider, I will put video, something like this. And the same here. I will add these as prefixes so you know that they have to do with auto mixing for video. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, perfect. And now let's visit these places and actually make these settings sync across instance. Let's have two instances for me to demonstrate what I mean. So these two instances are on the same group, and when I switch RMS, or even the fact that video is on and off, these settings are synced, but these are not yet. And that's the code that we are going to copy and paste and power through. Oh, thanks, Iwitz. And perhaps the best way is to just go over all the places where we have another setting that is synced. So I think that this one will do. And why do I need a default? I don't remember, but I will probably need a default for these two new sliders as well. And it is unfortunate that I have to repeat defaults here and there, but that's inevitable. And it is unfortunate because it means I will end up changing this and forgetting to change that. But it is inevitable because as far as I know, there is no way for me to get a hold of the default. So it is what it is. Okay, let's continue. And we are following the look ahead in milliseconds, which is a group setting. And we will need to allocate new fields in the data structure that allows for syncing of the parameters across groups. Right now there are 4 fields, 0 to 3. These are the 4 fields. I'm adding 2 of them now. They're going to be fields 4 and 5, which means that now we have 6 fields in this data structure, 0 to 5. Then we have an initialization thing here. Let's have 2 more of them. Looks good. Then we have a maximum here, but that is because we need to allocate some buffers for look ahead. I don't think we'll need that sort of thing for attack and hold for video. So I think I can skip this. Then this I will need. I really need to find a way to abstract this notion of group syncing because all this copy and paste is just annoying. I think that this will do. Oh, this is not right. And what this is doing is it is storing stuff, it is storing this setting into the global let's call it this global bus that allows the groups to communicate. And what this is doing is computing the same setting, the attack, but in samples this time. And I have reason to believe that, oh, this shouldn't be attack, it should be hold. I have reason to believe that we'll need the attack in samples, but we'll need the hold in another unit of measurement. I think we'll need it in terms of time, but we'll get to it when we get to it. I think it is easier to start with attack. We'll see. And the reason why I think attack is easier is because attack is a notion that an instance knows about itself when it becomes the winner, when it becomes the microphone of the person who is speaking. It can wait, and it knows how long to wait based on samples, and that's just going to work. But the hold is not something that one instance knows of. A hold is something that all instances need to agree on. So I think that the hold will need to be a bit fancier, and I think it will need to be in terms of time. We'll get to it when we get to it. Right. Now let's go to this, which is the next part that has to do with look ahead in milliseconds. And I think that what I need to do is similar here. Right, and what's happening here is, in case the global bus has new information for us, we are here on the block section, so we update our own internal state with the new stuff on the bus. Okay, all of this looks good to me, and I think that with all of this, we have the syncing of the parameters across plugin instances. There is no other work I think we need to do. Before we check this, let's see what you all have to say. Okay, let's get to it. Let's see if this is going to give us parameter syncing. Okay, so far so good. No, so far no good, because these parameters are not initializing correctly. And I believe that this is the place where that should be happening. And this doesn't seem right. I think that we need the default word there. And I think that that was the mistake. Okay, so far so good. Well, these parameters are not showing here, so that's a problem. I believe that we are missing these lines. And in this case, we are doing slider show last, so I think I'm going to do slider show last there as well. And then there. Okay, so far so good. but they're still not showing here. Why would that be? Supposedly video has updated here. Oh, but then video is not up. When you update the video slider, it will update this. But then I guess these two need to occur there as well. Because really this slider shows they don't depend on these sliders. They depend on that one. Okay, now I think that this is gonna work. Okay, and that's what I wanted to see. Now all the video settings show up like this. Perfect. And this is actually the third, so I'm gonna put it last. And the same way that we have all of these concentrated around video, I will have all of them concentrated around video up here as well. So with that cosmetic change, nothing should have changed in terms of functionality, but let's check. Okay, and then as I move the sliders, they're synced across instances. Perfect. That was way too much code I had to write just to make sliders show up. What are you gonna do? Okay, there is a lot of copy and paste, so I'm not 100% sure everything there is correct, but it looks correct. So now let's implement the attack. And how can we even test this in a reliable manner? Well, it is already kind of hard to tell because when I am testing this, and the way that I was showing this before is, well, it's not even working right now because I don't think I wired everything correctly. It is in group 1 and it has these settings that are currently ignored. And what about this video processor? It is looking at group 1. And the playhead is moving, so this was supposed to be working. Let's see what the Automixers say in terms of automixing. Are they looking at each other? Yes, they see each other and they are interacting in this way. Maybe I am never winning with my voice. I think I am though. Yeah, for instance, here I am winning for this couple seconds. So why is the Automixer from video not kicking in anymore? I have no idea. But even then, it would be hard for me to see if the attack was working because there is already a bit of a delay between when I am speaking and the video processor actually captures things and shows things here. Reaper is not really meant to do video in real time. So this whole test setup is kind of a hack. So perhaps what I should do is have a third way of getting this information out of the Automixer. Right now we have a video processor. We have a rudimentary way of controlling OBS, but we could also be just outputting a number. And the point of doing this is just to have a deterministic way to look into the timeline and see levels going up and down and the number changing. Yeah, that's I think the right thing to do, to actually determine, to actually see if the attack parameter is working as it should. And even though it is the correct thing to do, I don't think I'm going to do it now because I think it's going to be a bit complicated to do. It's not terribly complicated, but it is certainly a bit annoying. Or you know what? I think it is the only way we will know if we are doing the right thing. So I will have a Automixer video. I'll call this the debug JSFX. Crucially, it needs to look into the same namespace. And I will hard code it to look into group 1. So I will do something like this. And let's look into the global memory. And we are looking at group 0. But if I remember correctly, I did some cute little trick that group 0 is actually in position 1 in memory. Yes, just like that. And then we have the video cameras going on here. So this will have a size of 6. No. Where is this even in memory? Crap. It's gonna be complicated. I'll have to revisit a whole lot of decisions for this to make sense again. What is GMAM video cameras? Oh, that's what I want. That's the camera that I want. So that's the number I'm interested in. I think that this will do. Let's see. So I will put now another track that I will call Automixer for video debug. And in this one, we'll have this effect. And it should be outputting audio right now. Well, not quite, because this number is going to be the number of the camera of the person who is speaking. So that is going to be a number like 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Well, 0, 1, 2, 3, they could be interpreted as samples, so we could see this as audio input. What a hack. But it should work. And yet we are not outputting anything. So I don't know what's up with that. Let's see what happens when I hard code a number here. Then right, okay, it is outputting that number. Then it seems as though GMAM is just not being changed. Yeah, it's not. Let's do this setup again because the Automixer for video is not working on the preview and we are not getting any new numbers here. So perhaps I broke something in the computation, which would be weird because we just added sliders, but still. Let's turn on Automixer for video. And this is track 1. Oh, I remember. what I did wrong. I didn't set this as track 2. That's the problem. And now, yeah, now something is happening here to the audio input. And we will see stuff happening here on this as well. But you see how when I start speaking, it is going red, but this is moving faster than that. You see that how it became green here before it became green there? That's what I'm talking about when I said that the Automixer for video with the video processor doesn't seem to work very well in real time, and that's why I wanted this kind of debug output. And now when I'm speaking, the thing is silent, and when I'm talking, the thing is at 0 dBFS, which is crazy, right? But whatever, it works for us. And we can see that even this version is kind of jittery, and that's what we are trying to avoid, this jitter. Remember what happened to NASA's Mars Climate Orbiter due to using different units of measurement? Yes, they crashed. I remember that. It was because of inches versus centimeters, right? Or something like that. And I suppose I could also, instead of doing a whole plugin and outputting the thing as audio, I could also just look at the debugger on the editor here. But I have a feeling that this isn't updated as often as we need. This is only updated every, I guess, 2 times a second or something. And this is naturally going to be updated 48,000 times a second. This debugger will be updated 48,000 times a second. So I think that this is the one we need. And what's cool about this is that we can have something more repeatable than just my voice. So let's come up with a good test scenario here. And right now I have to keep this in a loop for the thing to be running, for the video processor to be working, but we will no longer be actually using the video processor for now. So let's have a MIDI item here and a MIDI item there. We'll put the tone generator there and glue. What this does is it is now just a sine wave at this loudness. And then let's say that person 1 is speaking up to here, and then person 2 starts speaking there, and they overlap for a little bit, but let's not have the loudness be exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is bring up the volume on this guy, say that this person is louder than that one. So right now, as things are, I should be able to drop Automixers on this whole situation here, and we should be able to see the scene transitions. Instead of just like observing them here, we'll be able to see them as sort of a timeline of the scene transitions there. And what we must do is turn on the video, and we must change this track number, and then this should have been outputting 0 and 1. Oh no, because now it's no longer, it shouldn't be looking at my microphone anymore. Perfect, perfect. So we see the output of the Automixer as audio right here, which means that I should be able to record the output of this track, and we'll see this on the timeline. Let's change this from recording input to recording output, and let's just record mono, and let's put this to record and give it a try. perfect. For some reason, it is even switching to the other camera before the other person starts speaking. Isn't that something? Is there some look ahead by default? No, there is no look ahead by default. What's up with this? I have no idea. It seems like my plugin, it's not the first time we observe something like this. It seems like my plugins are able to predict the future. I don't know how they do it, but it seems like my plugins predict the future. It is very weird. Anyhow, now let's implement this attack feature and we'll be able to observe, because as I increase the attack, this transition should go further to the right because the person is going to start speaking, but we have this attack period during while we wait. So we should see the scene transition occur like here, for instance. And then if you look at the timeline of the transition, if you think of this as audio and this as video, it starts to look like the letter L. That's why people call it an L cut. Anyway. So let's go to the place where we do the camera switch. Boy, this plugin is already large. It's not even doing half of what I wanted to do. This is the line where we set ourselves as the new track. We set ourselves as the winner. This is the line we are going to change. So right now, when we detect that we are the winner, we are switching right away. I don't want that to happen. What I want to happen is when we detect that we are the winner, I'm going to set this attack variable. And I need to remember my variable names. And naturally, I just want this line to run if this has happened. But I also want to know in which state I am. I need to know if, I guess there is this little state machine that we'll have to keep track of. The state machine goes like this. There is a state called initial. Then, when we are the loudest microphone, we switch to the attack stage. And when the attack period has elapsed, we go into the switch stage. Or rather, we go back to the initial stage, but we switch scenes as we do that transition. just like that. But if we are in the attack stage and we are no longer the maximum, we need to go back to the initial state without switching the camera. So there is another arrow, and this drawing is getting out of hand, but okay, I guess it goes like this. We are in the initial stage. We become the loudest microphone. We get into the attack stage. Then when we are no longer the loudest microphone, we go back to the initial stage. But if we have been in that state for long enough, we go back to the initial state, but we switch cameras. I think that that's the idea. But because there are only two states, I only need one variable, and I can use the counter as my state variable. So if I am the winner, I am setting up this counter that will go down. Otherwise, I'll set this counter to 0. So I guess I can write this line like this. I will need to update this to actually count. So this will actually count down from this. I never want this number to be negative, so I'll say I want the maximum between 0 and that. And then if our counter is 0, and I'm going to extract this variable, or extract this condition into a variable. I more or less believe, this shouldn't be like that. It should be like this. I more or less believe in all the lines I wrote, but let's reread them to see if they make sense. Let's start on the initial stage. We are not the loudest microphone for now. we should continue on the initial state, and the initial state is represented by this variable being 0. So, is the gain maximum? No, we are not the loudest microphone. So this condition will be false, and we'll get into the else case where this is 0. So video camera switch attack will be 0. As it is a good form for us to initialize this variable, even though in JSFX, as we use a variable, it springs into existence and its value is 0, which is convenient for us because the initial stage is represented by 0. It is good form to initialize this variable, so I will. And I will do that where? I guess here, for the lack of a better place. Okay, continuing with our example, where this is 0, but we are not the maximum. So we skip this, then 0 minus 1 is 0, and we end up at 0. The initial stage, perfect. And because we started with a 0 and ended with a 0, we are guaranteed to continue being 0 for a while. Then we become the loudest microphone. Let's see what happens. Are we the loudest? Yes. Is the camera attack 0? Yes. Is the gain maximum? Yes. Then in that case, we will do this. Well, I don't need this part, do I? That's better. Then we'll do this. Well, I already see a mistake. Let's retry. If I am not the maximum, then I want this to be 0. I will just say it like this. The problem that I am seeing here is that I would be resetting this every time. And I don't want to reset this every time. I just want to reset it when the state has changed. So now, let's go over this again. We are in the initial stage. This is 0. And we are not the loudest microphone. This is false. Not false is true. So we are saying 0 there. Here's a cute way of eliminating two conditions. Okay, and then because we are only using this in one place, we might as well inline the variable back in. Hey, there you go. So are we the maximum? No. Then set this to 0. Are we the maximum? No. Set this to 0. So we keep in the initial stage. Then we become the loudest microphone. Is the attack 0? If so, set this to a large number. Then go to the next line. Are we still 0? No, because we have just set this to a large number. So we're not 0 anymore. This line will be skipped. And then we decrement just like that. we could do a bit of a clever trick here and allow this to be negative. And I guess I will do just that. Not because it is conceptually simpler, but just because I don't want the attack to reset itself and start counting again while we are still in the count for that transition, if that makes any sense. Anyway, are we 0? Yes, to begin with. Make it a large number. Are we still 0? No, we are not. Well, that will become a problem, won't it? We have two conditions in a row and we want one of them to be true and not the other. That will not work. This logic is still flawed. We still have to work more on this. But I want a break, so let me see what you all have to say. What is the maximum number of code lines in one file that you have written? About 30,000, I think. You could have, no, probably more like 40,000. Something on that ballpark. But that's the maximum amount of lines that I have written on a project of mine, and I have written all those lines. I have contributed to other projects that have much more than that. For instance, what's the size of the type checker on TypeScript? Well, it is 2 megabytes. But how many lines? Yeah, so I have worked in projects that have around 45,000 lines of code in one file. It's no big deal, really, if you have good organization tools. It's not a big deal. In JSFX, we are sort of limited. So if I saw a JSFX with 45,000 lines, I would be like, eh. But with TypeScript, for instance, it's easy to jump around in the file using these breadcrumbs, using this outline pane, and it is okay. It's not bad. I have seen worse. You could have written an accumulator which is incremented at the sample rate for the winner, and at set value the video is switched. That's more or less what I'm going for here. Yeah. Oh, damn. Then I'm wondering why 200 plus lines is too big. Yeah, of course, but still I have around 1.5 thousand, and it is a little bit hard to work with that. Perhaps it depends on how you like to reason about things. I, for one, prefer to have a huge file than to have a bunch of small files. Personally, it makes more sense to me. Even in something like GitHub, I was able to navigate the codebase and find a file that is called checker. It is a type checker and it is in a single file. And if I open that file, the whole story of type checking is there in front of me right then and there, which I think is really good. There are other styles of programming that favor many small files. I tend to not like that. For instance, in a Rails, Ruby on Rails project, if you have heard of this framework, you tend to have 1,000 small files. And for me, at least, everything becomes harder. I have to open many files to make sense of one story, where one story, I mean just one use case. And something like a type checker would be 1,000 little files. It's difficult to navigate this in GitHub because you have to open many browser tabs. It's difficult to navigate this on a text editor because simple things like find become finding projects. Like when you try to find a piece of text like this, it becomes a find in project because you need to find this piece of text in the whole project. And there are certain things that just don't work, like some refactorings that don't work across files. And I also find that if you're trying to extract different files from the project, you end up having to create these abstraction boundaries that sometimes are undesirable, sometimes they're great. It depends. But I think it makes sense to have bigger file. I prefer that style. And in some cases, even I think that you should be splitting files depending on who is going to work on the files. For instance, if your team is like, say, one digital signal processing person and one graphical user interface person, then perhaps your effect would have two files or two folders, or in the end of the day, the abstraction would be between these two people or teams of people. I prefer this kind of separation than to separate things by, for instance, header files and CVP files. I don't really like that kind of separation. It's not my style. It depends if in that file is only one thing that is used once, then why you have to split it to another file. Yeah, that's just it. I think of things in terms of rate of change as well. If something is going to change fast, it should probably not be co-located with something that is going to change more slowly. It depends, but that's a good intuition. Can JSFX include external libraries? Yes, and we are including an external library. That is a library that we have been working on for almost 1 year now. That does a lot of things in terms of graphical user interfaces, some digital signal processing algorithms and things like that. For instance, in the Automixer, we need to compute RMS. That's in the library. So if our effect is 400 lines, which is not much, it's not small, but it's not much. But in the library, we have almost, we have 2,500 lines of code in the library so far. And it's only growing because it doesn't do 1/3 of what I want it to do. Other people, again, would favor many small files, which may be even better in terms of performance, for instance, because REAPER has to compile your JSFX, and the longer it is, the more it takes to compile. But for now, one big file, very easy to work with. You just take this one file, send it to someone. They have the library. Where were we? Yeah, this whole idea of going negative and everything is sort of a weird way of implementing what Mage was saying on the chat. So let's go ahead and do that instead. If we are the maximum, +1. And if we are not the maximum, 0. And if it is equal to that, oh, this is going to turn out so good. Thanks for the suggestion on the chat. Perfect. I think that this does the trick. Let's go over it. We are not the maximum and we are in the initial stage. Because we're not the maximum, we just set ourselves to 0 again and again and again. We become the loudest. Then this is going to be true, we get in there and we start adding. But we are not equal to this big number yet, so this line is skipped. And then we just keep adding because we are going into this again, and we keep adding and adding and adding. At some point we will reach that number, then we set ourselves as the current track. Perfect. Then we just keep adding and adding and adding. But we will not reach this number again, because we have already reached it. We are beyond it. I think this is perfect. And then we are not the loudest. We set ourselves back to 0. Perfect. Very roundabout way. I guess the diagram was bigger than the lines that implemented. But yeah, very, very good stuff there, I think. Let's give it a try. So we want to load new instances. We want to make sure that video is enabled, that this is track 2, and we have only 100 milliseconds of attack, which may be too little for us to notice the effect. Let's go to 200 milliseconds. And then we go ahead and record. I think we did it. Yeah, this is after. When we rendered this before, it was about here, and now it's about there. So I think that attack is working. And this will make things smoother, I think. Or at least it will be more natural in terms of the J cuts, L cuts kind of thing. Great. We haven't really finished hold, but hold that thought, because we will return to it tomorrow. Let's commit what we have. And I want to take note of something that will only make sense. Oh, we already have that note. Okay, it will only make sense in the following weeks. But anyway, we have implemented attack. Do you need to have an attack variable per group? No, I think I need to have an attack variable per instance. The instance knows that it became the loudest, and the instance is in charge of setting itself as the new camera. So I think I need one attack variable per instance. But for hold, that's a different story. Hold is something that all the instances need to be aware of. So in terms of hold, I think we'll need one variable per group. But that's tomorrow. That's tomorrow. We will return to this tomorrow. And on Wednesday, again, Tail will be here sharing with us his experience with Clap on his own fork of iPlug. Clap being the no plugin standard. So for now, thank you Mage, Siwitz, Bo, Juan, and Tail for joining us on the chat. Thank you to everyone else who is watching this and for supporting me on PayPal and Patreon, that sort of thing. I see you again tomorrow, and we will implement hold, which I think will be more interesting and complicated. So I see you there. Bye. Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.